I'm John Underhill, and this is the Red Special Guitar Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Red Special Guitar Podcast. On this week's episode, I'm talking to someone who he probably doesn't realise yet, but is one of the main reasons I got into Brian May. He has various names from different people, and you could say he wrote the book on the Red Special, and that's because he did. Simon Bradley, how are you? Nice to see you.
Woo! Hello, John. I'm nice to see you, mate. Thank you for having me on. Very kind of you.
No worries. Well, you were definitely on my list as soon as I decided that I wanted to do this. I thought I need to speak to Simon. One, to tell you off for inspiring me to buy lots of gear and seek out the Brian May tone from episodes from reading Guitarist Magazine articles from back in the day. And two,
yes, guilty. Sorry about that.
Two, to thank you for all your videos and content you've provided and the book and whatnot.
Thank you.
I just thought your story is hopefully interesting.
Well, I hope it is interesting. We're told by our parents, you must have a career, you must do this, you must do that, and my career is laughingly called a career because I just fell into the whole thing, really. These days, if you wanted to get a job on Guitarist, and if anything came up, you'd have to have a degree in journalism or from the National Union of Journalists or something like that, and be an intelligent person. I like to think of myself as an intelligent person, although you might not tell by the way I'm acting at the moment. But I certainly don't have any qualifications. I just applied for the job and got it. Whereas these days you'd have to go through Indeed and all this sort of stuff, and you'd get somebody devoid of humour.
Yes, which wouldn't have been so much fun over the years.
No,
no. So as I ask everyone, Simon, how did you first get into all this? Obviously, guitarist, but how did you? Can you remember your first memory of Queen and the first song you heard? Where were you?
I can. I'm much older than most of you lot, apart from maybe Marky Boy and JP. Mine was Bohemian Rhapsody. It's as simple as that. I was 10 in 1975, and because that video was everywhere. You know, still only 3 channels on the telly, and we used to watch Top of the Pops and all that sort of stuff, not understanding any of it, I hasten to say, because I said I was 10. But I liked the lights, I think, and I didn't know what a guitar was. I didn't know what a band was, I don't think. I come from a very musical family, but when we were growing up, it was more classical music, which is fine. My dad was he's not around anymore now, bless him, but he was a instinctive musician and can play anything. And he used to be able to get a tune out of most musical instruments. And my mum still is a music, although she's retired now, is a music teacher. So me and my 2 brothers, who are both younger than me, are very fortunate in varying degrees and varying avenues of music to be able to be quite well trained, classically trained, but also able to improvise things. So we are quite musically predisposed, which is why I fell into the guitar. My other brother's a bass player, and my little brother, I say little, he's how old would he be now? 52, I think, 51, 52. He's a professional cellist, so just goes to show. But yeah, for me, it was the Bohemian Rhapsody video, simple as that. And I do distinctly remember me and my little band of friends running around after each other on the playground, shouting Bismillah at each other. I distinctly remember that. And so in preparation for this question, that's the only thing that I can think of. I can't pretend I knew anything about popular pop music, popular beat combos, because it was all classical music in our house. The other memory that I have was a year later, which was Somebody to Love. And 1976 was the hottest summer since records began, and it was like 85, 90 degrees for 4 months. But the winter was particularly harsh, conversely. And whenever I hear Somebody to Love, even today, it sends me right back to running around. It's all about running around as children. In snow, up to my knees in snow, because obviously I would have been 11. And every time Somebody to Love comes on, it takes me right back to that. So that's how that's my first recollection of Queen, but I didn't know who they were from anybody else. Any other music, it was all Bay City Rollers. All the girls at school, at primary school, were like the Bay City Rollers, and I remember liking the Osmonds' Crazy Horses when it goes. I thought that was the coolest thing out. Not that I had any idea what it was. By that stage, I had a classical guitar, a little 3/4 size one, which I got when I was 7. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? And I really got into that. And I remember, not like today, you go online. I had a cassette, and it was 2 tunes. One was probably Michael Rowed the Boat to Shore, but the other one was Go and Tell Aunt Lucy. I definitely sound like Brian talking about the Shadows and all that sort of stuff, and I'd go, yeah, I've heard about them. But it was just 2 chords, G and C, and I remember the tape broke halfway through me trying to learn it. So apparently I worked it all out by ear. My mum told me only, not recently, but certainly in my adulthood. So I just got into music, sort of popular guitar music from there. So it's an interesting thing, but it's Bohemian Rhapsody is to blame for everybody, really, I think.
Well, I think it's got a lot to answer for, that song, and
it does.
Can you remember when then you made that decision to make that leap from classical guitar to electric, and was that something that Brian and Queen inspired you to do, or was there another influence there and you found Queen and Brian and the Red Special a bit later?
No, I discovered Queen in between classical guitar. It was only a nylon string guitar. It's quite pompous calling it a classical guitar. It just wasn't an electric guitar. But in between there, I got my epiphany with Queen. It was jazz. There was a friend of mine at school who had all the albums. Again, my dad had lots of 33 1/3 RPMs. But as I keep saying, with classical music and jazz, he was very, very into jazz. But piano jazz, Oscar Peterson and Thelonious Monk and stuff like that. And so it was. Sorry, when we're talking about jazz, that's right. So my friend lent me the only album of theirs that he had, which was jazz. So I thought, okay, so I put it on, and as I've said elsewhere, of all the tracks to make me fall in love with them, it was Mustafa, believe it or not. And I didn't know what the guitar was. The bit that goes that sort of bit. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know who Brian May was. Didn't know who any of them were. And I remember distinctly. I suppose it's like falling in love with a human being for the first time properly, And so that was 1978. So it must have just come out. I do remember Bicycle Race and Fat Bottom Girls, the double A single has come out. So maybe I'd asked to have a listen to jazz off the back of those, but I don't necessarily remember that. But what I loved about the album, of course, because it had the fold-out poster of all the naughty ladies, if you remember, on their bikes cycling around. Was it Wimbledon Greyhound track or White City or something?
I wouldn't know. I'm too young to know that, but
Oh, bless you. Well, listen to me. I'll tell you all about it.
No, I remember it well.
Yeah, so I had that get this, I had that poster on my wall, believe it or not. And it's 1978. It's not a thing that a 13-year-old boy would do, and obviously you have it up there as you're 13 for to admire the female form. If you catch I won't go any further. I know it's a family podcast.
That's the other podcast.
But it's the other podcast, yes.
Similarly named, but not about the guitar.
No, exactly. I'm on that later. But yeah, so I remember listening to it back, just on the vinyl, turning it over, and track 1 on side 2 was Dead on Time, I think. Yes, it was. And I've never heard anything like that. Just that sort of heavy sound, and I still didn't know anything about the guitar, nothing about the guitar at all. But between 1978. Whenever that came out, and the first time I saw them, which is a year later in '79, I bought all the albums.
Just listening to you say that, though, I mean, I remember finding them and then going out and buying all of the CD albums I could find at that point. And it was, in a way, I couldn't afford to buy them all in one go, so I picked the ones that I liked very much based off of the artwork, and then as I earned a bit more money as an apprentice, bought some more, and it was quite a nice discovery to to listen solidly to maybe 3 or 4 albums, literally solidly all day, every day, driving the car, going to work, sneakily at work on the way home, in my bedroom, and then to find another album that I hadn't been able to afford later, and then listen to that and go, wow, there's even more good stuff. It's a nice moment too.
Absolutely.
And it's different today because you can go on Spotify and go Queen top tracks play, and I don't know if people finding Queen today have the same experience that you had, and then the slightly similar experience I had later on. I don't know how people, because it's a lot different to me now than it was back then.
Well, I think it is, and I think kids of today, inverted commas, must be sick of listening to people like me going on about how good it was in the good old days. But albums are meant to be listened from track 1 to track 10 or whatever it is, and you remember. I can remember the running order of them all, and every album I had was on vinyl. Live Killers, a lot of them were gatefold sleeve, but the Live Killers thing, just open that up and there's all the pictures of them. Live Killers was the one I played until I wore out, because I didn't realise until later, but I'd seen them on that tour, although I don't think anything was recorded on the Crazy tour for Live Killers. But that lighting rig and on the sleeve, and it's just, I remember it so well, going to that gig and reading about it. And whenever I read Roger saying that he hates the production on it, I sort of go, well, I love the production, Roger. Be quiet, you don't know anything about it at all. But I used to love that album. But it was a proper infatuation. I think everybody who's into it, could be football, it could be anything creative. But I fell totally in love with Queen the band, and because I played the guitar, I was obviously drawn to Brian, and it was the most platonic of love affairs. Just saying, guitar hero in the true sense of the phrase, absolute guitar hero. And I read everything about it, and that was the other thing. I didn't know anything about the guitar, because I used to buy any magazine that had him or Queen on the cover, on the off chance of having another picture of Brian May. And I didn't notice he had the same guitar in every picture. I didn't know anything about guitar brands at all. I didn't know what a Les Paul was, what a Strat was, anything like that. But I remember buying a copy of International Musician and Recording World. I wrote it down here. It was July 1981, and that was the first time I remember them talking about the homemade guitar. And the enormity of the fact that he'd built it from scratch with his dad didn't hit me until decades later, because I said this was 81, and I thought, he's built his own guitar, blimey, did he? Well, bless my soul, But it's constantly, going back to all the guys on the forum, I'm constantly staggered by the amount of detail that these guys know. And building your own Red Special, irrespective of the Red Special book, just because of what Brian's done, it's, in all seriousness, a constant fascination, and I'm just filled with admiration for those guys, for you guys who are listening as well, who do it. It's just beyond belief. I don't know how you've got the patience to do it. I can't make an omelette.
Well, I think that's the great thing with the community, and this comes up in every podcast and every conversation I have with anyone at any meetup, and that is that what's so nice about what has now become the Facebook group, which is where most people tend to gravitate towards, is that it doesn't matter whether you are an absolutely fantastic guitar player and you sound exactly like Brian May, or as close as anyone can, or whether you can just afford a Burns, or whether you've built your own replica using all original vintage stock parts, or whoever. There's a massive mutual respect for absolutely everyone, and a love of what Brian and Harold did that brings us all together. And I can't find, and I'm sure someone will probably find one day, but for all of the other guitarists that are out there that have done anything special, there isn't a community like we have about the person and the guitar that is so open to everyone, and people want to help, and the information is there, and we've got people like yourself who, you obviously literally did write the book about the Red Special, and you've worked with Brian, and we'll come on to that, but there is no need for you to be on the forum sharing the information that you have with us. You don't have to do it. You're doing it because you love it, and because you can see that we're all the same as you, and you want to share that experience with us and share that knowledge and banter and.
No, absolutely. I mean, I don't, I'm no better than anybody else. I just, as we'll discuss, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to do the book, but it was a lot of work, and you don't get to be in that position without having a certain level of celebrity is not the right word, but knowing, he knows who I was long before I pitched the idea of the book. But, I'm a fan the same as everybody else who's on that forum, and if I can't think what my life would have been if I'd not gone into the guitar. But if I was into Queen, I'd want some lucky sod like me sending pictures of the body and the neck of me holding it up and all this sort of stuff. Because you do, and I don't share those pictures lightly, I promise, because Brian's very, very aware of his privacy. You'll notice there aren't any pictures that I post. He posts loads, but he can. But I've taken of inside the house, because he specifically asked me not to do so. He never tells you to do anything. He asks you not to do. We don't normally share pictures like that, he'll say. And I'll go, fine. That picture of us, me and him talking, that Pete took, and it inspired a conversation of the biscuits and the cups of tea on the table there. He was happy for that to go out, because that's in the refectory. And I've been to many Rockstars houses, and when you get to that sort of stature and the size of the house that these people have, one half is for business, which is the only half that people like me ever see. The other half is where he lives.
Yeah.
That's where he watches Coronation Street, or that's where that's where he studies, and that's where that's where his living space is. Like normal people like us would understand what a living space is.
Yeah.
But it's his privacy, and he does a lot of interviews from his house in Windlesham, in Allerton Hall these days, and that's where That's where I've interviewed him several times. Well, 4 times I've counted him, twice face to face and twice on the phone. Before we started doing all the book stuff. But he's a great guy, and it's like I was saying earlier, it's very weird to be sat at one end of the sofa while Brian May's at the other, strumming on the Red Special while he's talking about Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
It's very, very strange indeed.
I can imagine. It's a very. I can only imagine. It's it must be a very surreal thing, especially. I mean, Brian May himself, and obviously this is the Red Special Guitar Podcast, but you mentioned him talking about Freddie, and I mean, wow! Imagine being sat in a room with Brian May talking about Freddie Mercury as well. I mean, that is straight from the horse's mouth. That is the. Yeah.
It really is, but he only ever mentions Fred in passing. He's spoken more about him when we were doing the book, especially the updated version, which had the chapter on the film. More than anything else, but you would never, as a journalist, I would never have asked him anything about Freddie Mercury, because because it's baked in. And when he's talking about Queen, he's obviously talking about the 4 of them. Yeah. And I also want to make sure that he knows that I don't think that it's Freddie Mercury and Queen, which is a mistake that lots of non-believers do make, which does get me very angry. I must say. It's like, it's not Freddie Mercury and his band Queen. It's not. It's all 4 of them, and they wouldn't be the same if it was another member. They might not be better and might not be worse, but they wouldn't be the same. But he does talk about it, and he does talk about Fred, but I never bring it up unless the goal is yawning, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And then you have to be very aware. You're not saying how did you feel when he died and all that sort of stuff, because that's a Sun writer's question. That's a tabloid crap. I don't ever need to go there. But if he brings him up, I will follow it through as a line of questioning, and it's never, he never gets uncomfortable about talking about it. But what we all have to remember as fans is that they were thick as thieves, the 4 of them. Well, the 3 of them until John joined. They really were. And, it's sort of like, how would any of us feel if some red-faced journo like me was going on about how do you feel when your mate died?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to take any line of questioning like that. But he does talk about him, and especially about the film. They were very aware of protecting the legacy of Freddie, and he did talk at length about Freddie in the interviews I did for that chapter in the book. So it was really interesting.
No, I think the film's a great example of how to do something and to protect someone's legacy. And I think Rami plays it very well. And if there's a few scenes where you squint your eyes a bit, and it is Freddie on the screen, and I think it was very sympathetic to how he should have been depicted.
Yes, I agree totally. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, let's take a moment there to remember Freddie Mercury.
Sorry.
No, it's
no, quite. Let's.
It's so you forget, don't you? Not forget, because you can't forget. But there's, I don't know. We're talking about the guitar, but obviously there's a whole wider part of Queen and Brian's influence from the other three band members as well, in how his playing and writing would have evolved. And we haven't actually picked that with anyone yet. It tends to be more about Brian and Harold, and then people making stuff. So it's a really interesting thing to explore, Simon. Yeah. I just can't imagine being sat in a room with Brian talking about Freddie though. That way.
Well, I'll tell you about the first time we did him. I mean, it's the first time was for Guitarist. Again, I wrote it down. It was July 1998. And we went down. I went down with Neville Martin, who hopefully most of you will know, who's a former editor of Guitarist. He's still editor of Guitar Techniques. And Brian knew Nev, and so I demanded to go. I can't remember why we were doing the interview. I think it was something to do, maybe one of the solo albums. I can't remember. 1998. I can't remember what was going on. But we went down there, and I was like a rabbit in the headlights for the entire thing. So Neville was interviewing him, but I begged to be allowed to sit in, and I just sat there like Uncle Fester in the corner, just going while Brian and Nev were talking about the music or whatever the album was. But it turned out, as people know, Brian's very affected by depression, and it turned out much later, that he was in a very dark place when we were doing that interview in that sort of time. It was the time when the guitar was being restored by Greg Fryer, so Greg was there as well. So it was a very interesting time. I wish I could go back there knowing both how to do it and knowing Brian like I do now. Because the guitar was in bits. Greg was there doing all his magic wizardry in one of the ante rooms of the main house in the West Wing. Well, Nev, Brian and I were in the front room, and Nev was, in his usual great style, getting Brian to talk when it was obvious that Brian had no interest in talking at all. And I made an excellent faux pas at the end of it, said, "Can I have my photo taken with you?" And he went, "Oh God." He actually went like that. And I sort of shrank away. I still got the photo, God damn it. But on the way home, I just, I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. But I never thought after that, how 20 odd years later we'd be talking about a book that I wrote with him. But yes, interviewing rock stars is, as we've said, a dangerous occupation if you don't know what you're doing.
Was that the first time you'd met him for that interview?
Yeah.
So quite an interesting first experience.
Well, it was. I mean, it's... Again, I'm showing me age, but when you were at school, there was the knit nurse. You had to be... she would go through your hair to check with your knits. There was also a certain thing that boys had to go through, but I won't bother. Everybody knows what that is. Cough. Everybody knows what that is. But I was in an ante-room with me, Nev, there was a photographer, James Cumpsty, and Pete Malandrone, although I didn't know Pete at all. And I think Sarah Bracus must have been there as well. And all of Brian's public rooms are oak-panelled, believe it or not. So we were just chatting. I was in a state of nervous tension, just shaking, and we heard this clumping down the corridor, and of course he was wearing his clogs. I don't think he wears them so much now, but he was wearing clogs. Who wears clogs? Anyway, that's another story. And I thought, and it all went quiet, and it was akin to the knit nurse coming down. Right, who's first? And then Brian May walks in his clogs, 500 feet tall, with the hair. He's still black at those days, in black jeans and a sort of velvet blue coat. And I was just looking at him. I just looked at him adoringly. And then it went downhill from there. But we got a good feature, so that's all that matters. then the next year, which was 1999, we got him for the National Music Show when he played live.
Yep.
I know JP and I have talked about that a lot. I know quite a few people were there. Mark was there as well, I'm sure. And I was much more au fait.
Is that the one with the recording that's on YouTube?
Yeah, that's with the delays. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I basically just interviewed him on stage in front of 2,200 people or something.
Yeah.
And he was just charm personified, and he was a much better place, and he was a much better mood as well. And that showed. You know, I'd been mates with Pete. I was mates with Pete by then, so I'd been talking to him about what the gear was going to be, and we decided that Pete would have to stand by the amps and turn them off when Brian wasn't talking, because the hiss was so cataclysmically loud, as we all know. You couldn't actually hear what we were talking through our monitors, because 3 AC30s hissing away like a toaster in a bath, you know. But he was great. He was lovely that day. That's the first time I knew all about the guitar by then. It's the first time I actually got to play it, and playing the Red Special through his rig, which I've done a couple of times since, but that was the first time, and it made me cry. Not in front of anybody, well, only Mallers, but I've cried in front of him many times since then for various reasons. That's again all these different stories. But that's the first time I did it, just to a sound check. He goes, "Well, you did the sound check, brothers." So we just went clang, and it was just, honestly, the sound that he gets out of that thing, even with me playing it. You know, I think the closest that any of you guys have got is Thomas, and he was doing a demo of his stuff that Nigel had made, and that's the closest I've heard of any of you guys. It sounded just like Brian May, just like him, which is no mean feat. And I just sounded like me. But honestly, that thing through 3 AC30s on full, it's like a bucking bronco. It really is. If you take your hands off it, it goes like that, because it's hollow. Well, it's mostly hollow, semi-hollow. And but if you get it right, that it's just a G chord, and if you can do the sustained note on the E on the A string, like at the beginning of We Will Rock You, it's amazing. It would go on forever. But so within that 1998, I was an idiot in front of him. A year later, we were great in front of people at Wembley, and I said, "What's it like to play Wembley again?" And he said, "It's smaller than I remember." And we laughed. Oh, how we laughed! And much fun was had by all. And as he went off to the limo, well, his Volvo, to be driven home, he said, "Oh, you should come round for tea." I remember saying to Pete much later, "Should I come round for tea?" And he went, No, don't do that, no. He was just being nice. Come round for tea, okay. Do you want biscuits, Brian?
Yeah. What's your favourite? Hobnobs or rich tea?
The old chocolate digestives, my friend, we know that.
Well, we do. That's been well debated.
Yeah. Indeed. Well documented as well, yeah.
No, I won't go there, no. But how many holes did those biscuits have? Because were they the traditional digestives from the 80s, or were they the... No.
Oh, blimey, I don't know. He probably would have blocked them up with matchsticks.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't count the bowls in these biscuits, John.
Sorry.
Anal, I might be stupid. I'm not.
Well, there'll be someone on the forum that's recreating that scene, because that's the secret to the tone.
It is the secret to the tone, is having wheaty bits on your fingers, yeah. Definitely.
That's how he gets that crispy sound.
Oh, don't. We're going bad.
We are. Well, it wasn't going to go any better, was it? No,
it's already falling down.
It is. Well, yeah. It's the best way, though. But so, I mean, just taking stock of what you've said, so you obviously...
Yeah.
You're working for Guitarist at the point where you go to meet him at his house, and you tag along with Nev to listen, and you're staring gormlessly at him. And then a year later, just one year later, you're up on stage in front of several thousand people interviewing him and getting to play through the Red Special. The little boy inside of you must have been difficult to contain with that.
It definitely felt like it was happening to somebody else. Definitely. I was much more experienced at interviewing, full stop, irrespective of the stature of the interviewee. And it was part of a busy weekend because I was like running the live stage. So there were there was Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers there. There was the drummer from Oasis, Alan White. I think it was Alan White. Sorry, drummers. I think it was Alan White. There was a Japanese drummer called Jumbo Akira, who I don't really know, but he's a massive Yamaha player. Paul Gilbert as well, for God's sake. So it was like backstage at Live Aid. It was awesome. Yeah. But I was supposed to be managing the whole thing, so I didn't have time to get that nervous before doing Brian. Not least because I was looking after Paul Gilbert as well, and he's big enough. He's a much, Brian says he's not seen anybody play like that since Nuno Betancourt, and that's saying something. So I was dealing with schedules. I was dealing with managers. Previously I'd been faxing Jim Beach of all people, trying to book Brian May. It's like booking a band for your wedding. But I just happened to be speaking to Jim Beach. Jim Beach. I was more starstruck by Jim Beach than I was about Brian May at the time, believe it or not. And the fax comes back. Fax again. That dates it. Comes back with the Montreux Studios or whatever it is. It's like, God, this is just ridiculous. But it definitely felt like it was happening to somebody else. But I'd managed to get myself not worked up in a bad way, but I was really looking forward to it. So instead of dreading it, which was an easy emotion, I could have fallen into that emotion. I was really looking forward to it. And so I walk on, and Pete's got the amps, and they're hissing away, and I walk on, and there's a massive round of applause because I can't make any bones about it. Guitarist is a massive magazine then. Yeah. It's not quite so big now because lots of it's gone online. But in those days, everybody read Guitarist who was a guitar player. Everybody was in that audience to see Brian May read Guitarist, so they knew who I was. And it's my 15 minutes of fame. I mean, I find that quite embarrassing because what have I done? I just drink heavily and write and make funny jokes. That's all I do. I'm not a celebrity by any stretch of the imagination, but people knew what was going on. They knew why they were there. They knew who I was, and I come and they do a massive round of applause. And I go, "Oh, shut up! I'm nervous enough," which got a laugh. This is the rubbish that's on YouTube. So I interview Brian May and do the old bowing in front of him, we're not worthy. And 45 minutes later it was over. Yeah. Just talking, and he got the guitar out. I think he said, we're missing somebody on stage, I think, and Pete went and got the guitar out, and that, the guitar got the biggest roar of all. And as I say, it's enduring popularity because it's only a guitar. People don't necessarily know that he made it himself. We do, and as I've already said, it took me 15 years of liking Queen, 15 years of liking them before I even knew he made his own guitar. But it's a celebrity in its own right, and although we know that he made it himself, when you say that to other people, even at the book launch, or some journo from Fleet Street said, "Well, why does he make his own guitar? Why doesn't he make another one?" And you're going, well, if I have to explain that to you, I'll have to stamp on your neck. I mean, I have no idea. He made it himself. Well, was it easy to do? And it's like, I've just got to go and speak to Pete. Come on, man.
Oh, dear.
Just crazy. Oh, no, but there you go.
The struggle is real. I mean,
yes.
I feel sorry for my wife because I built my own last year. And before she met me, she knew who Queen were and Brian May, but she hadn't got a clue. He built his own guitar and the story behind it. And the amount of stuff. Anyone I speak to is like, "Why did you build your own guitar?" And you're like, "Well, just sit down for 45 minutes and let me tell you."
Yes, hold this. It's going to be a long one. The gospel has to be spread, right?
Well, what other guitar player in the world decided he wanted to play electric guitar? Family said, "Can't afford it." Dad says, "Tell you what, son, let's build one and make it the best guitar that's ever been built." They go on to build that guitar. Son becomes Rockstar with guitar, uses it for the rest of his career, and writes and plays the most iconic songs ever played and heard to man at all. I mean, that's a pretty big thing in my book.
It's unbelievable. Even we've both heard that story, that timeline a million times, and it's still incredible.
Yeah.
And even if somebody had done that and then put it under the bed and gone on to finish their PhD in zodiacal dust through the cosmos, or whatever the blooming heck it was, would be incredible enough in 1962, 63, 64. But as you say, to have played the solo to Bohemian Rhapsody on it, let alone everything else, is quite unbelievable in the true sense of the word. Quite unbelievable.
It is, and I mean that's why the podcast is here, really. It's just to grab the stories of the people who have been inspired by it over the years and who have helped tell the story of it and who've been involved with it, and to hear everyone's sort of view on it. And it's some of it's difficult to put into words, but I mean, you obviously, does it ever come up? Have you ever had the conversation with Brian about, like, when he's playing it, is it a link to Harold? Is that, because I personally, when I look at it now, I see obviously the guitar has some massive sentimental value for all the reasons, but there's got to be that sort of homage to his dad. Every time he picks it up, he must remember that relationship, and you can see, and I don't know that you can see, but from the outside looking in, obviously with the movie coming out, and he's becoming a lot more aware of I don't want to be crass, but his own mortality and the sentimental side of things. And is that something that's ever come up? Did that come up when you were writing the book with him, or was it sort of unwritten?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it came up as a subject. But when you're talking about them building it, he was an only child, so that's a start. He didn't have anything going with siblings. There's a great book called "Is This the Real Life" by Mark Blake, and he goes into great detail about the intimacy of the three of them, Mum, Dad, and Brian, and the academic expectancies that Harold had for Brian, which is one of the reasons why they fell out when he decided to leave university and go full time with Queen, and then they made up in 1978 backstage, wherever it was, Madison Square Garden, wasn't it? Anyway, that famous story when Harold says, "Oh, I get it." But absolutely, I mean, his mum didn't have anything to do with it at all, other than it was her knitting needle and her pearl buttons that he purloined to make the various bits, the inlays in the tremolo bar. But I think, reading between the lines, again, it's a subject that you don't, like Freddie, you don't say, how did you feel? I'm the interest that I have as far as doing the book. The relationship that he has with his dad is all part of the story. So it didn't need to be hammered home in the narrative or hammered home by my questions, by my interviewing, because it's there. But because Brian has kept all the bits, he's got the original hammer, his dad's hammer. It's only a normal hammer like you get from home base, but it's the same one. You've got the same workbench that they built the damn thing on, the same vice that he held various bits in to drill through, like the rollers on the saddle rollers on the bridge. So there we go. He's got the original vice that he held the aluminium in, that he drilled to make the rollers. He's still got all that stuff in boxes. The archive is like Indiana Jones. The bit at the end of Indiana Jones where there's boxes off into the distance. It's like that. They don't let people go in there. But amongst all the, they've got programs from 1980 and boxes of programs from 1980. Are boxes that say Brian's guitar bits. It literally says that, and that's where they found in one of those boxes a couple of years ago. That's where they found the original pickups that they wound for the original that Brian couldn't work out the polarity, so they squealed. So that's why he went and got Trisonics. But he's got all this stuff. I don't have my first guitar anymore. I've no idea where my little classical. No idea where it is. But through all the times that he's had, I don't know how many times he's moved house, but it's a mansion. It's an absolute mansion. And the fact that these pickups could have been lost in the bowels of the archive for that long, and then it turned up just a couple of years ago. Is quite staggering. But I think every time he thinks about the guitar, when he's grilled by the likes of me about what it was like building it, he'll think of his dad, and he does go quiet on occasion. You know, my dear old dad's been dead 17 years, and every so often I'll go, oh, bless him, he'd love to have seen this. You know, my dad would have loved to have seen this book. He knew how much I like Queen.
Yeah. So
I could empathise with Brian up to a point. You know, it's not all about passed away fathers, but you know, the guitar is definitely a totem for him, for his dad.
Yeah.
And Brian has often called it his shield, hasn't he? He'll stand behind it as his shield to protect him from whatever he perceives is coming to get him. And so, yeah, that guitar is much more than just a guitar, and not just for the reasons we've talked about. It's quite. I still can't describe it in words, and I'm supposed to be paid to be able to do that.
You're doing a better job than I am.
Awesome. Well, that's okay. That's what I'm paid to do, love.
So Simon, we've jumped around a little bit. Can you remember the time that light bulb moment where you suddenly went, he made that guitar himself, and it started to sink in, and the gravity sort of Queen and your experience sort of started to smack you in the face?
Yeah, I think it was the whole no synthesizers thing, because I didn't know anything about how to make music, but once I discovered from that issue of International Musician and Recording World that he made his own guitar, and that all of those strange sounds that you heard on Queen records came from the guitar, that's when I started going, now how on earth did he do that? And that's when I discovered the Deaky amp and all that sort of thing. But it was it's those guitar orchestrations that he did, All Dead I'm specifically thinking of. That is just a beautiful sound, just when it goes off and the piano goes into the major key and they all float off into heaven or wherever they're going. You know, you couldn't have guessed that was a guitar in a million years. But it turns out it's a guitar that he made with his dad through an amp that John made from bits found in a skip. I mean, it's just you can't catch your breath, as an old boss of mine used to say. So it wasn't until I reviewed the first Burns, whatever that was, 2001, 2000 something, and could play around with the switches to my heart's content. Because when I was playing around with the Red Special for the National Music Show, I didn't muck about with the switches. It was just neck and middle in phase and clang, the humbucker setting. But mucking about with the switches on the Burns, that was the light bulb moment. Because I did obviously he did the demo for the CD. He did a Burns demo for that. Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, because
I thought so. Oh, sorry.
That's right. No, you did a demo, didn't you, with Guitarist? He did the CD with a thing on it, and then you did a write-up on it. And was there a Queen lesson in the back of that book as well?
You'll have to remind me. I can't remember. As I said, it was so long ago. I do remember doing the review, and that was like a dream come true. And being able to play around with it. And get all the different sounds out of it, you know, everything out of phase with everything else, and doing that honky sort of that sound that sounds so horrible by itself, but actually embedded within the music seems to fit somehow. Again, that, you know, the Deaky in my opinion, has a pretty unattractive sound by itself, but with the guitar that adds a bit of meat to it, and the music that they put it all in, again, it just works. Why? Who knows? I don't really care. I'm just glad that music's out there. But yeah, all those. What was the other? There's another orchestration that really got me going. No, I'm sorry, it's gone. It's off day at the races. I'm just hopeless. Good old-fashioned Lover Boys. Sorry, they got there eventually. Which is a very different sound to All Dead, but it's still just the musicianship is what I appreciated. But as I said, playing around with the Burns for the review was when I got my head around the fact that actually they came up with all that that system. It's never been replicated by anybody.
No, well, the only replication of it is the BMG Ariel that comes out very shortly. But I remember that. You have a lot to answer for as well, Mr. Bradley. In my own quest, because I was a young man getting into music, and I'd been aware of Queen and Brian May, and I was playing guitar a little bit, and I bought the Guitarist magazine because it had a review of a guitar that looked like Brian's guitar on the front. Well, it might not have been on the front of it, but it talked about it, and then your review, and then it just every time then I went, it seemed to be when I was able to go and buy a guitar magazine, I'd always look through Guitarist, and if there was an article on Brian May, which turns out you wrote all of them, then I would pick it up and add it to my collection.
Hey,
and so you are the enabler of tens of thousands of pounds of expenditure in questing for this tone that...
I humbly apologise, but it's all part of the fun, isn't it?
No, and what's interesting is that, again, doing the podcast is all of our stories are very similar in like how we got into it, and
yes,
there must be something that's within all of us that means we gravitate towards this story and this guitar. But yeah, you've got a lot to answer for yourself too, sir.
Yes, I have been told that many times. Yes.
So
sorry.
He's not sorry at all. I can see him on Zoom, and
not in the slightest. No, I'm not sorry at all. I don't own a Red Special, so I don't care.
No. Well, you ought to sort that out, really.
Do you think I haven't tried?
What's the block?
I'm not saying anything more on this subject.
No. I can't think your wife's going to listen to this. My own wife doesn't listen to this.
Well, she's downstairs wishing I'd shut up, I'm sure, bless her.
No, so you obviously then go on in Guitarist, and I used to buy Guitarist, and I think I subscribed at one point, and you were always there writing about the Brian May stuff. I actually, I had a few guitar lessons when I was starting out, and I had a chap whose kid went to school with me, and it turned out he was also an author for Guitarist, and he used to write a lot about Stevie Ray Vaughan, which is Julian Piper. I don't know if you ever...
Oh yes, I know Julian, yeah.
Unfortunately, Julian passed away last year, I think, quite suddenly, which is very sad. Mm-hmm. I went to school with his son Sam, and Julian was very good to me when I started out in trying to explain to me about certain things to do with the guitar. But yeah, no, I used to buy them every time, and every time I went to the shop specifically looking for something, you popped up with another article about the guitar. And I used to think, what a lucky chap that chap there is, Mr. Bradley.
Well, we try to get Queen content or Brian content in once a year. So Guitarists would do 13 or 14 monthly issues. I mean, annual issues, one a month. But for the 12 months, you'd have like a Christmas issue, which would be 13, and a summer issue as well, when they were really flogging us to death. But once I'd got a relationship with Pete, and I knew as long as I didn't take advantage of his welcoming, I could ring up, and we could get an interview or some first-hand Queen content, once a year. So it was what we used to do, and what lots of magazines do, is sort of, are there any anniversaries coming up? If you can fill the cover of an issue that's 8 or 9 months down the line, especially if it's a sort of meagre month, then you're doing your job. And I mean, I'm thinking of the last time I did him face to face for the magazine, which obviously wasn't for the book, was for the 30th anniversary of Night at the Opera. So we went down there, which is, I've got it written down, October 2005, and I just talked to him about A Night at the Opera, which is a thrill, because it's a fantastic album. But a couple of nice little asides from that. In the magazine, I mistakenly gave the art department the inner sleeve of Day at the Races to use as page furniture, which got me absolutely hung, drawn and quartered. But also, if you remember of that issue, the cover has got Brian on the cover. We got our own photography, but he's got his first acoustic guitar. Rather than the Red Special, and is smiling.
Sitting in the room talking to Brian May about A Night at the Opera.
No, there's worse ways to spend an afternoon, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. One of the issues that always sticks in my mind is it the 50 greatest guitars? Or the 50 most expensive guitars? And
yes, yeah.
And the reason was, I think, there was, I forget, number one was what a Stratocaster might have been, Eric Clapton's number one Strat or something, and then Jimi Hendrix Strat, and then some other stuff. Yeah. And then, I don't know if you probably had a say on it, but you opened the pages and there was a picture of Brian May, and then a really lovely picture of the Red Special where you could see a lot of detail and lots of bits and bobs that you couldn't really pick out. And I literally must have spent days of my life staring at that thing, trying to see if I could notice anything different, and then phoning Mark Reynolds or Mike Ride or whoever and go, did you notice that on the knob this is... And you
it's weird, isn't it? Lots of people do that. I do remember that feature. I think it was top 10 rather than top 50. It might have been. But it's certainly, I think it would have been, because we got a value, an auctioneer in to give sort of fake, because they weren't actually going to be sold. And the Red Special was the one that he said, well, it's priceless. You can't put a price on it because it's not worth anything.
Yeah. But
it's in comparison to Clapton's or a Strat played by Hendrix, because more people can empathise with a Fender Strat because everybody has a Fender Strat, whereas the value of that guitar is down to the prospective oil sheik who's going to buy it, knowing and caring that it was made, that it's a homemade thing, a handmade thing. But I don't think there was a value placed on that piece. I remember writing that actually, that particular bit, because we all wrote our own bits.
It was priceless, I think.
But, that was a nice picture on that.
Yeah, it was a lovely picture. And that magazine, my own copy, is thumb turned to hell because of looking at the front cover and then looking at the pictures, and it's just different lighting. You don't know it at the time, but the way different lighting affects photographs and lenses and editing and all the other nuances of taking photos, which at that point is staring at this thing going, how do I get something like that? Because my Burns is not anywhere near that, and it doesn't look like that, and it sounds lovely, and it's a great instrument, but it's not got the same tremolo and the same bridge and the same... it just doesn't look like... It doesn't have that look, and there's a distinctive look between a really, really good Red Special copy and a non-really good Red Special copy, because it's got its own character, and I like the ones that look like they're homemade.
Yeah, fair. I know what you mean. Yeah, well, that's part of the aesthetic of the original, isn't it? Because it is homemade.
It is. If you come to the meetup.
No, I do intend to as soon as we're allowed. Absolutely, it's been too long. It always falls on weekends when I'm working. I just can't do it. But I'd love to actually meet all you guys. It'd be great.
Well, I think you'd be so welcomed as well, because everyone appreciates what you've done for us in Guitarist magazines and the book, which we'll come on to, and then your website, and keeping us up to date and answering questions and whatnot, which I said earlier, you don't have to do that. It's the same way Pete doesn't have to turn up to the meetup. Nigel doesn't have to tell us the intricate details of how a circuit works. And I don't know. I get this feeling that there is a mutual respect there between us and yourselves, who are in the know and in there, that you appreciate what we appreciate enough that you're happy to share information with us, because we're not going to run off and do things with it, and that we really do actually appreciate it and whatnot. I don't know.
Well, I think it's I think it's all part of the service. I mean, I think Pete's a slightly different kettle of fish, because he has to look after Brian in a professional capacity. When they're on the road and everything. Nigel's great. Me and Nigel have become very close the last 18 months or so for various reasons, which we'll go into. But he's just fantastic, lovely bloke. Guyton's a great bloke. I said Pete's one of my best mates now, in all seriousness. So I'm very grateful for all of this, for that. But none of us are any more worthy than anybody else, really. It's just, the story of how Pete got the gig as a guitar tech is on Queen Online. You have to dig it, but it's there. And his is to say, the Brownian motion of his jobs, which led up to him being guitar tech for Brian May, is as random as mine is coming to do the book or coming to be on Guitarist. He just happened to be the right place at the right time and the right bloke for the job.
Yeah.
But Nigel's talks in a foreign language and he's going on about capacitors and all that sort of stuff. I just take the piss and he goes, "It's only because you don't understand it." And I go, "Yeah, it is." And it's the same with Guyton, but it's very nice to be able to speak to these people as mates. Yeah. Whenever I needed whenever, because Brian misclassified the Vox AC30 for the book. He said I can't which way around it goes, but he said it was a Class AB, where it's not. It's a Class A. And I could just ring up Nigel very quickly, and he goes, he always says that. No, it's a Class A. So I just made that. I corrected that error in the copy without telling him, because it was just incorrect. I'm sure he said it was an AB, and it isn't. It's an A. But I just wanted to be certain. And I can just ring up Nigel, and I can always just ring up Pete. Oh, Pete, when does he use? Because I didn't know that he used the D key live. And several guys on the forum correctingly assured me that he did. I said, no, they don't. I thought, hang on a minute. So I could just ring Pete, and he goes, yes, he does. And I went, thank you very much. What does he use the wah pedal for? And he tells me. So I can just ring up, and being privy to that sort of information is as much a thrill for me as it is for anybody else. Believe me, I'm not in a position to ring up Brian on spec. I'd never do that. But I can ring Pete because he's my mate. And if he says he doesn't know, he'll tell me he doesn't know, and then that's fine. That's how it works.
Now, all of our interactions with the names you've named, Andy Guyton, I've done some work with Andy on the Time Warp guitars, so been in communications with him now for several years. I've known him since he started making the original replicas, but in more recent years, communicate with him a fair bit. And you couldn't ask to meet a nicer, more down-to-earth, lovely, skilled chap that is so humble to his own craft. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a genius. He's ridiculous. And
what he can't make, he just isn't worth making. It's ridiculous. And then Nigel as well. Nigel's been a fantastic forum member and come to lots more meetups than lots of us, and has always supported them. And again, it's I had a technical issue with the Ariel podcast where my recording equipment wasn't quite right and the levels aren't right, and Nigel was just flat out, oh, if you want me to help you with it, John, just send me the audio for the podcast and I'll get it right for you. And you're like, you don't have to do that, Nigel. I'm doing this for documenting stuff, but you don't, you're just offering your services for free. And the story of Pete coming to the meetup in Reading, we hadn't invited him, not because we didn't think he'd come, but I don't like to think that people would come to the meetup because they're expecting something or someone to come. It should be because they want to come to see their friends and mates. And Pete walked in and then genuinely, in that moment, spent time with absolutely every single person who had bought something with them to show. And he picked up Matt Netherwood's guitar and got the next too thick. And he went over to Luke Timmins' pedalboard and he programmed Luke's G major 2 for him to Brian's settings. And he didn't have to do that. I can't imagine if you went to a Steve Vai convention that Steve's tech would wander around and do the same thing. I can't think anyone else would do that. And
I think Steve's tech certainly wouldn't.
No, I think they get. I think a lot of things get lost in communication, especially with written form. But having met all of them at least once in a capacity, I think they're all top blokes, and they're all doing the same thing that we're doing.
Yeah, they are, and they are. You're absolutely right. I'm glad that's come across, because Pete is one of the most generous people I've ever met. He really is. He's since the National Music Show thing in '99, we've been mates ever since, which is great. And I can talk to him for hours and not talk. I never talk to him about Brian May, because it's like talking about work. He'll bring it up on occasion, but we've got much more things to laugh about than talking about Brian. Really.
Yes. Things that are on your phone that you've said as other things recently on the forum that I'm sure I've read have been you looking at other stuff, but we won't go down that road.
It was I was showing him the woman, the Queen of Dragons from Game of Thrones on that picture actually.
Yeah, not a picture of a
She wasn't wearing much, which is no. Of course, I can't say I was showing Pete a pair of boobs. I can't show him that. Because Brian took the picture. I can't, can't debase Brian's photographic skills.
It's a great picture. It's very well.
It is a great picture.
It's very well framed. I like the composition.
Well, it's not his first time. Yeah. It's lovely composition. Lovely.
Would have looked better in stereo, but
Oh, don't start off. Yeah, stereo. God.
No. So
sorry. Go on.
Sorry, we've digressed completely.
We have again.
So you've you've obviously then you've met Brian, you've written articles about it, and then your time with how do you get onto writing the book and pitching in the book? Because I was aware of, as a fan on the old Brian May, I forget which forum it was on, but there's always been murmurs and rumours about a book being made or want to do a book. Did that come from you to them, or was that something that they had thought about and then asked you to do, or you heard they'd thought about it and thought, well, I could do that for you?
No, the whole thing, as far as I'm aware, came from me. He's often talked about, even during the process of doing our book, because it's ours, not mine and Brian's, that he's always wanted to talk about doing one. But I'm not aware of any documentation that would have made up a book about the Red Special prior to the one that we did. But as far as we can blame Pete again for this. Working on Guitarist, we used to review a lot of stuff, including books. And I think I've told this story before, but I can't remember what it would have been. But it would have been, let me see, 2011 maybe. We got the book through of David Gilmour's Black Strat, and it wasn't very well written. The repro was really poor in my opinion, and the design was really poor in my opinion. And I thought, well, there needs to be a book done on the Red Special. There really does. And so I rang Pete, and he said, oh, that sounds like a goer to me, Bradders. And so what he suggested I did over the ensuing 4 months was come up with a complete plan. So what that meant was all the subjects I wanted to cover, the feel of the narrative. I always wanted it to be in the first person, because I wanted it to be like Brian talking to me as a fan, and obviously by extension to everybody else. So that was the only thing I was certain of. I just came up with with all the questions that I could think of based on my knowledge of it, and I picked a few brains along the way, and came up with a number of chapters that would cover the subjects that we wanted to do. I knew that he'd already written that piece about him playing on the roof at the Queen's birthday thing. He'd already written that, and he wanted Guitarist to print it, back in the day, but we couldn't make it happen. So I knew that was there. So I knew that was a chapter, and I obviously used the old trick of grabbing loads of old pictures with lots of help from Greg, of course, who runs the archive. And I wanted to get as many pictures in there that hadn't been seen before. The Live Aid one we've seen a million times, and there's one from the Game Tour that we've seen a million times. But there's quite a few in there that we haven't, just general agency shots or press shots that haven't been reproduced thousands of times. But all that stuff, and Pete, once we started talking about it, Pete said, well, he's got all the plans and all the tools and all the photos. And because Harold had built a box Brownie camera, they documented the entire thing. So that's where all those fantastic images come of the thing in bits, in black and white, with the original pickups on. So once I'd had a chance to go through all of those with white gloves on, I hasten to add, and you've got the plans with the F hole and the diamond shaped inlays on the neck and some strange bridge and all what the hell's going on, and once allowed me to formulate a plan. Once you have a plan, then that's when you have to come to pitch it. And with pitches, you've got about 2 minutes with anybody. If I'm pitching an idea to you, let alone pitching an idea to Brian May, you've got 2 minutes. So my opening gambit was, I think we should take the guitar apart. And instead of him going, get out of my house, he went, he goes, which he does a lot. Pete everybody else went pale. He didn't say no. And off the back of there, once his interest was piqued, I made the pitch, and he was happy for me to start working on it properly. So normally when you do this sort of thing, once you've got an idea, you have to go and get a book deal. But obviously I've said that I didn't need to get a book deal, because I was basically writing it for Brian. Now, it's not a ghostwriter, because a ghostwriter just takes mumblings and forms it into a narrative. Whereas what this was basically a 5.5 hour interview in one hot August afternoon. where we covered the entire thing. So all of the copy for the first book, apart from the bit when he's playing on the roof of Buckingham Palace, was a 5.5 hour review. It was a 5.5 hour interview, which was specifically tailored by me to go in one direction, then another, to fill holes in the chapter plan that I'd come up with, because I was very used to doing feature plans for the magazine. It's just a bigger version of that. Yeah. So instead of 3,000 words, it's something like 30 odd, I think. I've not counted them recently. It might be less than that actually, because there's loads of pictures in there. But yeah, he was well into it. I mean, it was a difficult birth. I had to go and pitch it to the publishers, not with him there. So a friend of mine, Sarah Clark, who was an art editor on Guitarist at the time, came up with a few dummy covers and mock-ups of spreads, and just using Getty images that we had and pictures of a Burns rather than the picture of the actual guitar. And they just needed to make sure that I just wasn't some chancer, because obviously anything that's got Brian's name on it and Queen's name on it sells, you know. This is before the London Stereography Society was in existence, so a lot of the Queen books went through this publishing house, Carlton Books, who are now Welbeck. But you just go in and pitch it, and they said yes, go for it, and you get a budget, and you just take it from there. And it sounds very easy, but it was about 7 or 8 months of planning, because obviously Brian doesn't make any decisions very quickly, and every single comma has to go through him. So you do the interview, you transcribe it, you write it, you get it you plan it out and lay it out, and just send him a massive Word document over email, and then cross your fingers. And 3 months later, I hear back that he doesn't like it, and it's like getting your homework back. It's like, oh God, 3 out of 10 see me. So, but that's his right, you know. And he wasn't like saying, I don't like it, do it again. He said, I don't like it because of this and because of that, and he didn't understand. I hadn't made a good enough job of explaining to him what I was trying to get across. So one afternoon, he said, well, I've got some ideas, so why don't you come down to the house? Come down to the house? Why don't you come down to the house? And so we went into his office, and he'd just had knee surgery the first time, so it was very painful for him. And we sat there for about 3 or 4 hours, hammered it out. He decided that it should be first person all the way through, which made it so much better. And he said, it was dark by this stage. He said, I've just got to go and get some air. So I'm just outside on the patio, again, his version of patio, not ours, stretching into the distance. And he said, what's looking up a light in the sky? It's like a comedy sketch you'd write. What? Oh. So we went back into the house, came back with a telescope that he'd built with his dad in the 60s. I built this just after the guitar, and I was going, yeah, okay. And looked through it, and I thought it was an aeroplane coming into Heathrow, but it was actually Venus. And he talked all about Venus for 10 minutes. I like astronomy, but I've got a PhD in it. I know where Saturn is, and that's about it. And then not to make jokes about Uranus by laughing. But we looked through the homemade telescope that his dad had made after we'd spent 3 hours talking about the guitar that his dad had made with him. And that was an absolutely surreal moment. And I went home, and over the next 2 weeks rewrote the entire thing. And he said, that's more like it. And so we hammered it out a little bit more over email and over the phone. I went down there one more time to go through pictures and to pick a cover image. And it was signed off, and the rest is history. So it took, from pitching to the launch party, it was about 19 months, something like that. But that length of time is purely down to how long it takes Brian to make a decision. And I say that with respect, because he's got much more pressing things to worry about than a book about the guitar.
Definitely, and he's involved in so many other things as well. So any of his time is very precious, I'd imagine, from his other passions. And again, wow, what?
Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool story.
It's so cool. I mean, even just a chance to look through, you're there chatting about the guitar he built with Harold, and then you're there looking through the telescope he built with Harold. It's just must be.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
well,
words can't really put into. Yeah, wow, what a.
No, I can see that. Well, I can see the words of the struggle for it. Well, as I said before, it certainly seems like it happened to somebody else. Yeah. I mean, a way of sort of, dealing with that is I wrote a sort of series just for the Red Special website that I have no affiliation to. I hasten to add, I just keep that going for the love of it. Really, it's sort of a marketing tool for the book, to be honest. But I do enjoy writing, and I wrote a sort of 5 or 6 part story of how the book came apart. I know how it comes apart really quickly. How it came to be, and there's the whole story about the telescope. But it just felt like it's happened to somebody else. And if I think that he's my guitar hero, and he's the reason why I play the guitar, which is true. Although I've got wider guitar influences than just Brian. I don't know what I would have been doing. I wouldn't have gone into guitarist if I didn't play the guitar or get into the guitar. I could have got into the classical guitar and gone a completely different route. But yeah, looking through the homemade telescope at Venus in his back garden is bizarre, to say the least.
I can imagine it's one of those very special moments, though, and one of those like standing there watching yourself looking through it, thinking this isn't happening to me.
Yep. No, absolutely.
Well, no, in the book, the first issue came out and we were all chomping at the bit to see it because we knew there's going to be some juicy details in there that we didn't know about, or that, more pictures for us Red Special anoraks to pore over the minuscule minutiae of how big the block of oak is that sits under the pot plate, and what angle the screws are inside the guitar, and all that good stuff. Yeah, it's
crazy, isn't it? It's all the good stuff.
All the good stuff, which means nothing to anyone else when you try and explain it to them, but to our band of merry men means everything when you start constructing
Absolutely.
One.
Oh, absolutely. Well, my original idea was for it to be like a Haynes manual for the Red Special. But that was shot down very quickly because Brian wanted it to be a much more human story, and it is. As we alluded to earlier, the thread of his dad goes through the entire thing, the entire book, from page 1 to page whatever it is, and it's just him and his dad working away. They made it all up from scratch, but the scientific approach that they lent to it, like working out the scale lengths on a slide rule and the position of the frets on a slide rule, goddammit. Let alone making that tremolo, from springs from a motorbike or whatever it was, and a motorbike saddle and the knitting needle and all this. It's shelf edging. It's crazy when you go through the whole thing, but it's even crazier to think that he's still got the original plans, as I say. The hand-drawn design schematics from 1962, before they even started building the guitar.
And that's the crazy thing, or the most impressive part of this, is we all devote our time to replication. And we try to replicate Brian's sound, and we try and replicate what Brian plays, and to do that we replicate his rig, and we replicate his amps and his treble boosters and his pickups, and we replicate the guitar, and the book was able to give us a lot more information so we could get even closer without actually having seen the guitar or taking it apart, and having those experiences which we've not even talked about yet, which we'll come back to. But Brian and Harold designed this thing. It's not, it's hard enough to build one when you know exactly what it's meant to look like inside and to replicate it. But when you're building it and it doesn't exist and there is nothing to copy, that's infinitely more difficult, because you're having to create solutions to problems that you didn't even know existed, and that there isn't a path well trodden to get to the guitar in existence. You've got clearly they didn't go down the Fender slab, get a bit of wood and notch a hole in it and screw the neck to it, and away you go. It's intricate details that have never been replicated, probably because it's so bloody difficult to build and it's not scalable. But they're coming up with solutions to things that the guitar has withstood the test of time, and it is the most iconic guitar, I think, in the world, and it's an absolutely fantastic sound it creates, and they created that from scratch. It's I still I don't struggle with it because I understand, but I do hope people think about it in those terms because yeah, crazy how clever they actually are, and to be able to do that. I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, copying stuff's easy. Copying stuff now with the book is a lot easier than it was if you're Brian and Harold in the 60s trying to make this up. And
no, absolutely,
it's a testament to Harold's mind and Brian's mind to be able to put it together into what it is. And so, sorry, I've completely rambled there, Simon, in my
it's all right.
Ridiculous.
Please feel free.
Ramblings. It's just that every time I speak to someone about it, I remember why I like it so much, and it's not very often that you're afforded time to talk to someone about it in the whole thing and someone else's story in this sort of way.
Absolutely.
Normally, my wife would be knocking on the door saying you've been on the phone too long, or you're at the meetup having a drink with someone and someone else wants your attention, or someone else buys you a drink so you become slightly more inebriated and then you can't remember what you wanted to say, and it's just great fun. But no,
it's good.
So you also I'm trying to think which is the best question to ask you next. You then go on, so the book goes out and it does really well. Do you know how many numbers you've sold of it, the original, across the world? Or I know it's a tall order to ask off the top of your head.
All I know is the first print run of the first issue. I've not got any figures for the second one. Sold out. I think the first edition did about 21,000 worldwide, which doesn't sound much, but I think it did most of those copies in Europe. It did a few in America, and even less in sort of Australia and Southeast Asia. These are the English language versions. The first edition had an Italian translation done and the Japanese translation done. I've no idea, I still don't know, and lots of people have asked me with the the revised version, what translations are going on with that. The only thing I've heard, and this was months ago, is that they were looking at a South Korean version. And with respect to South Korea, maybe Spanish or German or French would have been, or Italian even, might have been a more marketable proposition. With the greatest respect to South Korea, it's a lovely country, lovely people, lovely food. But I don't know. I don't know how many it's done. I just know that the print runs have sold out, but there's no plans to reprint it as far as I'm aware. But everybody needs to be aware that I only wrote it. I'm not privy to the publishing side of it at all. I want to be. I've asked to be included in it. But they're quite right not to add my little voice to what Brian wants, or what Jim Beach wants, or what the publishing company wants. We had a launch party for the first one, excuse me, and for the second one, the publishing company didn't do any promotion for it at all. Nothing at all. I thought there'd be a launch party or something, but there wasn't anything like that. And Brian didn't seem that interested either, to be honest with you. He was more interested in sort of the stereoscopy that was going on, and I had to beg that he would do an Instagram post, because lots of people read his Instagram posts, and he grudgingly did that. With the greatest respect to him, I mean, I've not heard from him since I did the interview for the second book, so I don't know what's going on. But without any promotion, it could have sold a lot more. But it's not about the selling; it's about getting it out there, and it's out there and it's sold out. So that's all we can do, I think.
Yeah, and I think the additions are very welcome. And how did the second book come about? Is that something you pushed for, or is that something Brian asked to do off the back of the film?
That's a good question. I can't remember offhand. I think Brian was keen to do something because of the film. I think it came from him. I remember thinking that a chapter on the film would stick out a bit in a book about the guitar, the original guitar. But then Guyton had all the pictures of the mock-ups that they made for the film, and Brian was very keen on doing it. And if he wants it done, then that's fine. And Pete suggested that we did another chapter on all the work that's been done on it since the 1998 restoration by Greg. Which made sense. So I went down for an afternoon and we just talked about the film, and Pete and I told me all the work that had been done. And this is before the tremolo. This is before the tone knob fell off in Dallas. But it was, things like the machine heads, the low E machine head had broken. One of the tabs had come off the neck pickup, the neck trisonic, and falling into the strings. All these little things, and the replacement of the dot on the 12th fret, the central dot on the 12th fret, all these sort of things, which was interesting. And because there was documentation for it, like pictures, I had an hour-long chat with Guyton about it, and spoke to Brian about it, and those two chapters came together quite easily, to be honest, because it was all there. Yeah. It didn't need a plan. It was just filling the obvious gaps. As I said, I suggested I interview Gwilym Lee, and Brian was very much up for that. But unlike doing the original book, you had to be aware of the number of pages that you had. We only had a specific number of pages for these two chapters, so that was a constraint that I'm used to from magazines, but isn't usually a constraint at all if you're doing a reference book, let alone a novel. But that's my area of expertise, having been in publishing for 17 years, and it was okay. We'll have to cut this and have a picture there, and I wrote a whole picture list for the publishers. This picture needs to go here, and this one needs to go there, because they will all be supplied by Guyton, some by Nige, and some from Greg from the archive, as well as some shots of the guitars in the gallery, like the Ariel, for example. I had to get from BMG. I had to get a Guild BHM1 from Gary O'Donoghue in America, which some of you guys might know, and getting photography done by those guys of that strange Guild prototype that he plays on the Brixton live video. And I can't remember, the Frank and the Baby Blue BMG, which was shot with a tremolo arm over the pickups, which I could have killed them for. But hey, I wasn't there. They didn't wait for me to come down and direct it. So, but it sounds like I'm moaning. I'm not. I'm very happy with the way that it came out, considering we didn't have that much time to do it, and not that many pages in which to do it as well, more importantly.
Is there anything that you thought later on that you found out, or that you would have liked to have included, that you would have liked to have included, that didn't get included in either of the books?
No, I was happy with everything, because it's about the guitar. It's not about the amps, and it's not about the pedal board, and it's not about this, and it's not about that. It's all about the guitar, and I don't think there's anything else in the guitar that we could have done. I mean, one point I was going to mention is that what I used as a yardstick was, if Brian said it, then I would take that as the truth. Now, what I mean by that is, it's the knotty debate of whether the middle pickup was reverse wound and is in upside down. Now, I had a long chat with Marky Reynolds about this, and I'm happy to believe him. I asked Brian, and Brian says, I don't remember doing that. I don't think it is, no. So, irrespective of what the prevailing winds may tell us, I decided that if Brian said it, then that's what it would be, and then it could be debated, not by us lot really, because we'll do it anyway, but debated ad infinitum, because obviously he doesn't remember a lot of this stuff. We as fans and anoraks, as we've said, we know all this stuff. He doesn't remember any of this stuff. He does remember some of it, but some of the details he doesn't remember. And it's which is strange.
Is it though? Because if originally my original trade was an electrician, and I probably couldn't tell you which screwdriver I used to use when I wired a 3-pin plug originally, because the job was to wire the 3-pin plug, and I just used whatever screwdriver I had. I'm not saying that the guitar's treated like a screwdriver, but it's a tool to get a job done, as much as it's this, as I've personally said to you, that totem of his father. But they're there making music in the moment and doing things and changing things and trying to get this thing to work on the road and probably making adjustments on the fly. It's probably things that you just wouldn't remember because you're busy worrying about something else that's far more important. But to us, you'd be like, why wouldn't you write that down and document it and take a picture and make a note? But again, back then, you didn't have a phone in your pocket. You couldn't take a picture instantly and make a note, could you? It's a different time. And
well, that's it. I mean, we didn't talk much about what it was like on tour in the 80s. I was more thinking about when they were actually building it. He remembers, because what you've got to remember, he's been asked about the guitar so many times, and as what I definitely wanted to do, I didn't tell him this, but I didn't want him to say, not palm me off obnoxiously, but to say the same old stuff over and over and over that I'd read in many magazine interviews with him about the guitar, and everybody else has as well. But I think the depth that he went into got us over that hurdle quite quickly, and the fact that the first chapter is talking about his influences and his childhood really leads people in, and then the second chapter is highly technical, and then it all gets very anarchy, which is what you want. If he's got a scale of the scale lengths on graph paper and he's talking about hysteresis, whatever that is, I'm lying, I don't know what it is. It makes it a unique thing, and that was the idea. It's as unique as the guitar, and people who don't care about the guitar could get a lot out of that book. Which is what I like. Which is what I like about it. There's nice pictures of Freddie doing his stuff. There's nice pictures of guitars, and if you don't care about hysteresis, then you can gloss over that and go back and look at nice pictures of Buckingham Palace.
You can.
I think it's that side of it was 50-50. I remember coming up with some of that stuff in response to what he was asking for.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a thread on the old school forum about where probably Mark and Julian have taken clippings from all the different magazines as he's done interviews to, and they can see the contradiction in what he's saying about various things. He's just not going to remember, and put on the spot as well. You're never going to remember exactly what you did on this day 300 years ago when you were probably thinking about, I've got a gig tonight and I don't really know what's happened to the guitar today. I'm quite tired. We've been travelling, and I've got to get up and play again for 3 hours tonight.
Yeah, and that's why it needed a journalistic decision to be made by me. That if he said it, then that's what it would be, because you've got to have a point of reference somewhere.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to get anywhere by saying, well, in 1981 you said that you did this, because he would have just gone, don't contradict me, boy. It doesn't take much to get. Doesn't take. If you're going to argue with him, that's when he'll turn off very quickly. Yeah. He's the most welcoming. He's as nice as everybody hopes that he is, I assure you. But if you argue with him, then you won't get very far. Believe me.
No,
I never had to argue with him.
No, well, hopefully, as you just said, I think you've never had to argue with him. So.
Well, to be honest with you, he's always right. And if he wants one thing and I want another, I can't think of a scenario where my desire to get my way would be more important than arguing with him about red is green and green is blue. It's just not worth it. It's his book and his guitar.
Yeah.
I did come up with the whole idea and wrote it, but it was on the back of what he told me. It was basically a transcription of an interview that we did, as I say. So it's certainly 50-50.
Well, I think you and I both commented on an Instagram post the other day. There is a thread here, but it was someone asking a question about Brian with the owl mask on, playing live at the moment. And there's a lot of debate around, people don't like it, people like it. And I think both you and I said, or one of us said it and the other one liked it and agreed, that it doesn't really matter as long as Brian's happy and enjoying what he's doing, whether or not you like it. Absolutely. Because if Brian's happy and is enjoying what he's doing, he's going to make the best music and put on the best show. And surely that's the most important thing, not whether or not you think it's a good idea to dress up with a sparkly owl mask.
Correct. I'm sure that sounds like something you would say, but I completely agree. Yeah, completely agree. And they got rid of it because he couldn't see through it. He couldn't play Bohemian Rhapsody through it. That's the truth.
She's crazy, isn't it? Because one of the things that always brings a smile to my face and reminds me he's human is the Starlex video where he plays Bohemian Rhapsody a step too high or too low.
Yeah.
And I remember. I'd learnt Bohemian Rhapsody. I wouldn't say I learnt it from that Starlick's video, but I certainly picked up and watched that video over and over and over and over and over and over again, and for years played Bohemian Rhapsody wrong, not completely wrong, but in the wrong position because Brian did in that video.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's easily done, isn't it? Just learning from videos. Yeah, definitely.
Even the great man makes mistakes, but not intentionally.
Indeed, and it doesn't matter, and it still doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't at all.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Because it makes no difference at all. And I think someone wrote into the soapbox, didn't they, and asked him about it, and he's I play from positions and I started the route, and I just must have picked the wrong one that day. But
yeah, we've all been there.
We have, and still there many times. But the book is brilliant, Simon. It's absolutely fantastic read, and
thank you, John.
The content in it and the written words and going through it chronologically makes a lot of sense. But the detail that it goes into, and it's up there with, if you're an aspiring anorak or you want to join the elite club, you do well to read the book and take it all in, because I've been studying the guitar from the forums for nigh on 20 years now, and there were a couple of things in there that I didn't know that I got from the book, and I was fairly confident with myself that I knew a fair amount about the guitar, and it's nice to learn that I didn't actually have all of it down, and that there were a few secrets there that I wasn't aware of. So it's good for that. And no, it's just fantastic. And your website as well that you put up, the stories that you put on there, and the other photos that you've shared. You've been very gracious to share the picture of the Red Special, the big one for the podcast as well, which is on our Facebook page. I did make sure I asked you before I did it, because I wanted to get
you
permission.
did, yeah.
And
well, I have to, I'm very keen about permissions for photos. I know lots of photographers who just get their stuff nicked left, right and centre, so I'm very keen on that. All I needed to do was just ask Richard Gray, who took that shot, and he said, well, why would I care? And I went, fine, John, knock yourself out, mate. But as long as I've asked, that's all. And you do always ask, which is much appreciated.
Well, I think it's only right to, because it's not my work, it's someone else's, and I don't want to steal anyone else's work. I happily ask you some questions on a podcast, and hopefully ask you something someone else hasn't asked you, and make for an interesting listen. But if I'm gonna do something from someone else, I'll ask permission, because I think it's the right thing to do, and it's respectful. And I do have, I'll probably get shot down for this, but a fair bit of respect for you, Mr. Bradley, for what you've done over the years.
Oh, thank you.
And
thank you very much.
I do. I mean, I've been badgering you every year. I don't know for how many, maybe the last 2 or 3.
Yeah, you have.
Come along to the meetup, and you've been very good at providing me with information and bits and pieces to bring along as well, and supporting the meetups from afar, even though you haven't come along.
No,
we must.
As long as if I'm working, I can't. I'm a part-time bus driver, mate. That's how the mighty have fallen. So unfortunately, if I'm working on Saturday night and I'm at 6 o'clock on Monday morning, I can't come to the meetup. I just can't do it. Well, but the planets will align, I assure you. I'm sure we can work something out.
If COVID-19 allows us, this year's meetup is in October the 9th in Reading, in Thiel, Reading, in the birthplace of the recent meetups. So please, if you can make it, I know everyone would love to have you there, and probably ask you lots of frustrating questions and geek out. But
I'd love to come, seriously. But if I can, we will for sure. Promise.
Good. They've got that on tape now. So
yeah, fair enough.
No, and one of the other things I was going to ask you about, just because I read it, and I love reading people's stories, but I do find there's something else when you actually hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And was it later last year or mid last year, you gave us a little bit of an insight into you auditioning for We Will Rock You in London. I just thought maybe worth you talking me through that, if that's okay, and how that came about. And
yeah, sure. Well, I can play the guitar. I know which way around to hold it. I can hold my own in most company, but I'm nobody's idea of a session player. I can't read music. But Pete rang at the magazine one day. It must have been 2011, I suppose. And he basically asked me if I knew of any guitar players, local players, or in British players, not because it needs to be British players, but British players who had any West End experience. So I knew a few. As I said in that thing, Phil Hilborn, of course, was the first guy I thought of, but there's Sean Baxter as well, those sort of people. And I said, well, look, what's it for? And he said, well, don't tell anybody, brothers. He always starts stuff like that, don't tell anybody. And then tells me the most terrible things. But they were putting We Will Rock You, the band, together. They'd got the musical sorted, they just needed a band for it. And they were trying to fill all the slots. 2 guitarists, they didn't need a singer, of course. 2 guitarists, bass player, keyboard player, and a drummist. And I said, well, I'll do it. I can play the guitar, And he said he didn't for once go. Well, it's not really your thing, mate. He said, yeah, absolutely. So I was allowed to go through the whole audition process, and as I subsequently found out, it's sort of meat and drink to a lot of players. People, guitarists, session musicians, and people like that pay their bills getting a gig on We Will Rock You for 18 months. So in hindsight, I do feel a bit cheeky having a go. But then they wouldn't have invited me down, and I got through to the last 3. So it wasn't like I was just throwing a guitar down the stairs and saying, give me a job. So you go down to the studios in Chiswick. I can't remember exactly what they're called. Is it Metropolis? I can't remember. I'll have to read the story again. And we had to learn Who Wants to Live Forever. Oh, and One Vision. That's right. And you have it's all a headphone, but it's all new to me. I've been done loads of demos for guitarists at this stage, but this is sort of like it's all isolated. I've got AC30s in the back in the isolation room, which you can't hear unless you put your headphones on. Brian and Roger and Mike Dixon, who was the musical director, was in the control room looking at you like this. And you just have to play. So I just learnt the 2 songs that I could play them upside down, left to right, on your iPod, just playing along. And it went really well. I didn't make any mistakes, and I wasn't there wasn't any music to read, not that I could have read it anyway, but it was just play along to One Vision. And they sacked the singers halfway through the morning of the first day, so by the time my slot came around, we had to do it with no vocals. And the sort of cues that you get from vocals and lyrics in bands, let alone playing One Vision in front of Roger Taylor and Brian May and Mike Dixon. So does it go down, 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 down? Does it do that again? No, it doesn't. But that bit before, the hammer-on solo, I don't hammer on. I'm a massive Van Halen fan, and I don't hammer on in my style, as it were. So you have to learn how to do that. On a Red Special, it's all a bit cramped. The scale length is a bit weird. I still had the Burns at that, the 003 Burns at that stage, so I took that down. Took all my leads and all that sort of stuff, and Pete was going, what have you brought all that stuff for? Look, and there's leads and guitars everywhere. I just struggled on the train like I was going to a gig, I just sort of turned up with 40 B&H and a Cornish pasty for Pete, like I normally do. But it was, it was a very, thinking back on it now, I wasn't out of my depth, because I can play guitar with anybody and hold my own. I really can. It sounds very boastful, but it is true. And I played that. I practiced it so long, those 2 songs, and my versions of it, by luck, fitted into the versions that they had. So the strange bit in One Vision with all the strange echoes going on, all those sort of bits, which is like thousands of guitars going on before the final chorus comes in. Just think about learning that for 5 minutes and think about which bits you'd pick out to play. I just picked, by luck, the right bits. And the same goes for Who Wants to Live Forever. Doing those volume swells on the Red Special, which wasn't used to playing the Red Special. My Burns at that time. But I got through to the last 4. It sounds like The Voice, but we got through to the last 4. And because I hadn't done a West End show before, they decided that my lack of experience would be a problem. And they were probably right, but I was so disappointed not to get it. Alan Darby got it, who played with Clapton and people like that, and good old Jamie Moses as well, and everybody knows his connection. That's fine. Neil Murray was playing the bass. I must say, I thought if they were going to, no, I don't know Jamie, but he's a great player. Don't get me wrong. I'm not disrespecting Jamie at all, but I thought if they were going to pick Jamie, what was the point of having guitar auditions? If you're going to have Jamie and Neil, you may as well just pick Jamie and Neil, because Brian knows exactly how good those two are. So I felt that was a bit strange, but then, it's nothing to do with me. I'm just a writer and guitarist. And then, however many months later it was, Pete rang up and said, it wasn't Pete, it was Sarah Bracus actually, said that Jamie decided he didn't want to do it, and they were going to start the auditions for another slot. Would I still be interested? Yes, absolutely. And so we had to learn. What song did we have to learn? I can't remember. I have to read the story. Put it on the spot here a minute. I'll have to remember the story. And God, what song was it? Edit out.
I can't remember.
Everybody's shouting at me. You plonker. Hammer to Fall. Sorry, yeah, I knew it was an easy one. So I learnt Hammer to Fall, but of course, the version I had was on the album Queen Rocks, and it's in A, isn't it? Yes, of course. So I played it in A, but the actual on the CD, it's somewhere between A and G sharp, maybe a sample rate or something. So I had to tune the guitar down every time I did it, and tuning a Red Special down with 9 to 42s makes it go even more out of tune than it normally is. So I found the rehearsal side of it in the kitchen a bit more strenuous than I had previously. The auditions were taking place at Rogers Studio rather than in London, so I had to drive. It's sort of the arse end of Godalming in Surrey. The weather was awful. My car kept conking out. It was so stressful. I couldn't find the place at all. It's the biggest house you've ever seen, but there wasn't a front door. They had to go through the fields and all this sort of stuff. So it was very stressful before I even got there. I was the first up, so I'd been there about 15 minutes, and I was first up. And it turns out they were very keen to see me, because they were very hopeful that I would be good enough to do it. But unlike the last time, I was shit, quite frankly, because apart from anything else, the amps were in the same room.
Oh.
And it's not an excuse, because, well, it is an excuse, but it's a reason why I was so crap, because it was so loud that you couldn't hear what you were playing. I know, again, that sounds really stupid. And again, there were no vocals, and I'd learnt the wrong version. I'd learnt the single version rather than the album version. And I broke a string, and we had a jam that was in the wrong key, and it was just a nightmare from beginning to end. So I'd gone from being quite hopeful to not being able to wait to get out of there, And you'd think playing, and Brian was just had his head in his hands like that, and he sat there in front of you. Well, I say in front of you, 30 feet up against the wall in this colossal studio of Rogers. And it's just he really wanted the ground to swallow. He really wanted the ground to swallow you up. So it was a great life. It was a great experience, but it's ultimately not one that ended well. But I think, if I'd had however many years or months on We Will Rock You, I would have been well out of my depth. I really would, because you would have had to have learnt how to read music, and you can't read music on the fly playing the guitar. I used to play the bassoon when I was a kid, and that's not a euphemism. It's actually a bassoon, and I could read music then. But I can't be reading an arrangement of something like Crazy Little Thing Called Love, which most of us can play really well. If it morphs, and I'm just spitballing here, but it morphs into Hammer to Fall in the middle of it. I couldn't have done that. So in hindsight, I'm quite lucky that I didn't get the gig. But at the time, I was distraught, absolutely distraught, because I'd screwed it up. Pure and simple. It wasn't anybody's fault. I just screwed it up. But hey,
I couldn't imagine being in a room and playing in front of Brian either, especially something he wrote. That must be.
Yeah.
That must be not something I'd want to do.
But no, that just added to the whole squeaky bum time side of it, to be honest with you. and you did feel like you were a little fly under a microscope, and they're all looking at you because they're in a circle. I'm by the drums trying to get cues. There's no vocals, as I say, so it's impossible to find out what's going on. And everybody knows how to play the riff to Hammer to Fall. So he goes, okay, go and it's so loud, as I say, so loud, and something's going in the background. It's going, of course. Neil's incredibly loud. The drums are incredibly loud, and Spike was playing the keyboards as well. So it was just one thing after another. Mucked up the bit before the solo, mucked up the solo, had a jam in B, but it was actually in A or the other way around, and then I broke a string and said, I think I'll go home and cry. Which I almost did.
Such a shame. But, yeah, I don't know what to say, Simon, to console you. I don't know if there is anything to... Have they ever mentioned it to you since? Or
we talked about it, excuse me, we talked about it the last time we were with the book, actually. Even Brian, actually I won't tell you what he said because he might not want me to say it, but Pete said, it's like being in prison, Bradders, you got away with it there. And I thought, well, maybe I would have liked to have given it 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
But I'm so not deserving of a West End theatre slot playing the guitar in a band, really, because some guys work their arses off to get something like that. So for me to just walk in would have been a bit unfair. Not that I would have cared about that at the time,
no. But
I think doing 8 shows a week for 6, 12, 18 months would have been too steep a learning curve for me to be able to handle. I really don't think I would have been any good at it at all, and then would have got sacked, and then that would have been left an even nastier taste.
Yeah.
So I can look back on it now as an experience, as you say, playing through. It wasn't just one AC30; it was bloody 3, all linked together, of course. Why can't we just have a line 6 pod, for God's sake? It's 3 AC30s on 10. The usual thing.
Yeah, and it's one of those things you get the... Unless you've had that opportunity, some of us have been fortunate enough to speak to various people who buy 3 AC30s and get a splitter and get the chorus and stuff, and you stand there in front of it and you turn it up full and you think this is going to break the house, and when you get it right and the planets align, it's a fantastic feeling with the Red Special, because it does talk to you and you feel completely connected with what you're playing, and the guitar and the sound coming out is one, and you are at one with it, and the guitar vibrates on you. It's a very special feeling, and when you finally get in control of it and work with it rather than against it, it is very special. But I can just, in that situation with it up full, it's just
really awful.
It can go wrong so quickly, even if you're on your own in your music room trying to do it. Which again, you must then a whole new level of respect for what Brian and Queen were doing all those years ago up on stage playing that stuff.
Oh yes, it's ridiculous. As I say, the volume is as we all know, is just cataclysmic. And he still has the same volume now, just with these monitoring systems. I don't mean the in-ears because he doesn't really like those. But for him to go, he didn't want to go wireless, but now he knows it adds 6 dB of gain more. The Sennheisers add loads more gain onto it. He likes it now. He goes, I need that gain. And I was thinking, you need more gain. He says, I need it, just to feel it under the fingers. I'm going, hey man, it's your funeral. That's fine, whatever you want. Of course, just keep playing, will you? But it's as loud as ever, and now that Pete's got the rig running perfectly now, with Nigel's help, with that power attenuator Kikasui thing. It sounds better than ever, and he's playing really well, irrespective of what anybody thinks about Adam. I think Adam's great for Queen, and they are Queen with Adam Lambert. Again, I have no interest with people who say Queen died with Freddie, because they plainly didn't. And as long as we can go every couple of years until he decides he's too old to the NEC or wherever and listen to that guitar and those voxes sounding like that, I don't care if you're singing. It's just, I don't care, monkeys. I think you can hear that guitar. It's what it's all about.
I think if I was up there singing, you would care. You'd be saying something completely differently.
Maybe 10 minutes in. Is he at his foot? Just give it all the Deos, Johnny, but you'll be fine.
Deo. There you go. For one night only. It's no.
Thank God, said everyone.
That's it. Everyone's left already. Where's it, guys? Where have you gone?
Yeah, done it.
Simon, are you still there? No, I think. I mean, what you can see in him now is he's enjoying himself. Roger's enjoying himself. They're really enjoying what they do. Queen, to me, when they played with Paul Rodgers, I was up for going to see them, and I saw them loads of times because it was my opportunity in my lifetime to see Brian May, my guitar hero, play in front of me with the Red Special. But it never really felt like a Queen gig because it never looked like a Queen gig. Like, the show wasn't there. The grandeur wasn't there. It was more like how you would expect to see a rock band that wasn't Queen playing. It's probably not explained this very well. But then I took my wife to Dublin for her birthday, and we saw Queen and Adam Lambert, and it was like smacked you in the face. We're watching Queen right now. This is not just about the music. This is the whole thing. This is a show. This is an experience. And you know, people criticise because they probably can, and they're sat behind their keyboards and they want to, and that makes them feel good about themselves. But it's it's Queen, and Brian and Roger and everyone involved is having a whale of a time, and they're putting on a fantastic show, and not one person that in that place of wherever you're watching it isn't singing Love of My Life with Brian playing it, and the hairs on the back of my neck still stand up and when that magical moment when Freddie comes on the screen, and it's it's definitely more Queen now than ever. No, I'm now thinking about all of the wonderful things they do in the show to honour Freddie and the band and whatnot. It's a great thing, and in many ways it's a shame that COVID's got in the way and they weren't able to tour, and it's been postponed another 12 months, but I just think we're lucky that they're even thinking about coming out again and doing it, and let's hope that there's another few tours in them so we can see them a few more times.
Yeah, I think I've got a funny. I don't have any inside information, I assure you, but I don't think they'll do anything once this one's done. I think it'll be a long time before we ever see them do it again. If so, I hope I'm wrong. I very hope I'm wrong. I don't have any inside information, I reiterate, but I don't know. They're just tired. He's just tired the whole time now.
Yeah.
But when is it? But we'll see. I hope they do. I just hope they do, because Adam's fantastic.
Yeah.
He has breathed new life into them. He really has.
And you can see Brian smiling when he's playing now, which you go back to watching Paul Rodgers, and I wouldn't say he's not enjoying it, but it's a different experience for sure when you.
Well, it's a different experience when you've got to do I can't remember what 3 songs they did. Oh, they did All Right Now, didn't they? As soon as they do that, and Wishing Well, as soon as they do that makes them more of a cabaret act than any accusations of Adam being just a cabaret singer. I love Paul Rodgers, don't get me wrong. I didn't want to go and see them with him. I thought that'll do. But then when Adam came along, and you see some videos of him, and then we went whenever they played last 2018, was it? The one before just before Christmas. He was absolutely fantastic. Pete managed to blag us in, and it was like seeing him in 1980. It really was. He's nothing like Freddie. He's different. Just because he's a gay man and can sing, that's about it. Yeah. You know. But you're absolutely right. The grandeur was there, and seeing them in 1980, and then seeing him in 2018, it was the same sort of feeling, the same sort of vibe, and I'm sure that wasn't there with Paul. No, but I didn't see them live, so I shouldn't really comment on that.
Well,
I don't think it worked.
I mean, I always look at. I'm sad, and my work background makes me look at things in construction and facilities and logistics and how you'd go about making that work or do that thing. And what I took away from seeing them with Adam was that they're pushing the envelope again on modern stage setups and what you can do live. And that is the Queen mantra. That's what they used to do throughout the whole of Queen. Isn't just what can the music do, but that show. What can they do to those lights we talked about, Live Killers, so iconic and not done by anyone else. And they're still pushing those boundaries now and trying to use new technology and see what else they can get away with or do or make work on, and you think that machine is touring. It's not just sat in one place for them to film a video. It's that whole Frank rig and stage curtain and Brian stand. They're having to take that with them. That's not easy to engineer, and you could just put a stage out and have Brian and Roger and Adam play, and people would still enjoy it, but they go the extra mile because that's the right thing to do, and it really comes across, I think.
Absolutely.
Simon, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you tonight. We probably wasted far too much of your time, but thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you. Been great to be on.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. You've been a great insight, and I've been wanting to chat to you for years now, and luckily I reached out and you said yes, so I seem to be very fortunate with the podcast. But if people wanted to find the book, where's the best place to go and find out about the...
Well, it's still on sale on Amazon. It's still there, but theredspecial.com will get you through to the specific page on Welbeck's site. I don't run any of those sites, including the Red Special one. I put content on there, but the best bet is Amazon, to be honest. And I'll be doing less and less on that site now because there's not much. I don't have any more pictures to put up there. But hopefully I'll keep it going. If there's something that I post on there that's of interest, I'll make sure I put it on the forum so everybody gets to see it. But I don't have any more pictures that I can think of, although I have a trawl through my archive every so often and go, oh, there's a picture of a string, and I put that on, and we all love that sort of anorak rubbish, so that's what we're all here for. But to buy the book, best bet is Amazon. It's £12 last time I saw, and for information, theredspecial.com, simple as that.
Lovely. Well, hopefully you'll get a little bit more traffic from people listening to this, but I just want to say thank you again for not only for agreeing to do the podcast, but for getting a job at Guitarist and writing all those articles and enabling me and all of the other geeks out there to find out a little bit more about the guitar when information was so scarce, and then for creating such a wonderful relationship with Pete and Brian that you pitched them the book and then were able to bring that to life, because it's one of those things that I hold dearly to my heart because of what the guitar means to me, and it's a nice thing to own to go with my own story, and I'm sure that must be the same for everyone else that bought a copy, and without you that wouldn't have come to be. So thank you very much for that.
Well, it's very kind of you to say that. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on.
And keep safe, mate, and I'll speak to you again at the meetup.
Yes, sir. I promise I'll come when I can. Cheers, John.
Cheers, Simon. Thanks, mate. And that was Simon Bradley. Simon, thanks again so much for your time. It was great fun chatting to you and being in touch in between and since then. Thanks again, mate. Much appreciated. I really do hope that one year we can line you up with coming to the meetup, which segues nicely into talking about the Red Special Guitar Meetup this year in the UK. That is on the 9th of October. And if you want to learn more about that, please head over to redspecialguitarpodcast.com, where there should be a page up soon with details. Or if you want to jump early, please head over to the Facebook page, either the Red Special Forum and look for the events, or the Red Special Guitar Podcast Facebook page, where there you will find all the details about how you can pre-book tickets in advance to come along to the meetup. Now, I've had a few people email me asking if they needed to bring anything. No, you do not is the easy answer. There is so many people bringing so many different bits of kit. We've got everything covered already, which is fantastic. However, if you do want to bring something either that you're working on or that you own or that you think might be interesting to other people, then please do. But also don't feel you have to bring something to come along. Just a smile on your face and you, so we can put a name to a face on the forum, would be absolutely fantastic, and is the whole point of the meetup. But yeah, you can find out all the information online. And I would also like to say a massive thank you again to my patrons on Patreon. You guys rock. I couldn't do this without you. You and your little special group on Facebook keep me smiling when it's hard to sometimes. So thank you guys for that. And we have some more wonderful episodes lined up in the not too distant future. And I promise you I will get that guitar review out on YouTube of the Guyton Time Warp very soon. Very, very soon. So stay tuned on all of our social media platforms. Thanks so much again for listening, everyone. It means the world to me. It really does. You all keep safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.